don't belong here, SEAL." They laughed as Ethan stood alone in the mud. He didn't react. He'd heard worse on real battlefields. But the mockery hid something deeper, a growing threat inside the base that no one else dared to see. When Ethan uncovered a secret data drive, he realized the enemy wasn't outside the wire. It was inside the system. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and the miracles God hides in the darkest places. The air over the Colorado plains was thin and restless, carrying the faint metallic scent of snow that never quite arrived. Fort Ridge Military Base lay silent in the early dawn, its barracks half shrouded in mist, the mountains beyond glinting like old steel. Inside the base's command office, a young Navy SEAL named Ethan Walker stood at attention before a desk littered with folders marked "Confidential." His orders had come suddenly, no explanation, no preamble. Evaluate the Ranger training program. Observe, report, advise. 3 words that said nothing and meant everything. Ethan had been in the field long enough to know that evaluation was often a polite term for cleaning up a problem. The colonel on duty that morning, Sarah Donovan, spoke with a calm edge that hinted at long years of leadership. She had seen too many young men return from war looking like Ethan, too composed, too silent, the kind of silence that didn't come from discipline, but from carrying ghosts. "You'll be working under Captain Marcus Hale," she said, tapping a pen against the file. "He's one of our best, but he has strong opinions." She looked up, as though deciding whether to add something more, then didn't. "You and your K-9 will have quarters near the East Training Range." Ethan nodded once. He didn't explain that Rex, the German shepherd at his heel, hadn't been sleeping much either since Afghanistan, that the dog sometimes woke in the middle of the night with a low growl, pacing, searching for enemies that weren't there. War did that to both man and beast. It rewired their sense of peace. When Donovan dismissed him, Ethan stepped outside, the morning air cutting into his lungs like memory. The base was waking up. Boots striking pavement, the metallic rattle of gear, the smell of black coffee drifting from the mess hall. He walked through it quietly, not trying to belong. SEALs didn't blend in easily among Rangers. The rivalry between branches ran deeper than most outsiders knew. Rex trotted beside him, head low, tail stiff. The same posture he used in Helmand Province when he sensed danger. Ethan reached down, brushing his hand along the dog's neck. "Easy," he muttered. "Different battlefield now." Fort Ridge, unlike the dusty deserts Ethan knew, carried a deceptive peace. The mountains made people believe they were safe here. He knew better. The danger of this place wasn't IEDs or ambushes. It was arrogance, the kind that festered inside systems too proud to change. That was what command wanted him to see. Not how soldiers trained, but how they treated one another. Captain Marcus Hale appeared that afternoon during formation. His reputation had arrived before him, a decorated ranger, known for his uncompromising attitude and disdain for anything that smelled like bureaucracy. He shook Ethan's hand with the precision of someone measuring grip strength rather than greeting a peer. "Navy, huh?" Hale said, a smirk forming before his tone hardened. "We'll see how your kind does in real training." Ethan didn't respond. He'd met men like Hale before, brave in combat, reckless in peace. They mistook order for weakness, discipline for softness. Throughout the day, Ethan observed the drills, taking notes as required. The cadets ran obstacle courses until their lungs burned, barked orders at one another like ritual. It was chaos disguised as toughness. He'd seen this pattern before, the illusion of strength that collapsed under real fire. In his report notebook, he wrote only one line. They trained for pain, not survival. When evening came, he sat alone on the edge of the parade ground, Rex resting beside him. The sun dipped behind the Rockies, painting the sky with copper and bruised violet. A breeze stirred the dust, carrying faint echoes, shouts, laughter, and somewhere far away, the deep, rhythmic thud of helicopter blades. It reminded him of that night in Sangan Valley when everything went wrong. He could still see it if he closed his eyes. His teammate Roberts bleeding out, Rex whining in the darkness, the heat of his own fear pounding in his ears. That was the night Ethan stopped believing in invincibility. Now at Fort Ridge, the ghosts were quieter, but still there, waiting. He looked down at his hands, strong, scarred, steady, and thought about what the colonel hadn't said. He wasn't here just to evaluate. Someone wanted to know whether the new Rangers were ready for the wars that would never make the news, and whether they could follow orders from a man who had already lost everything once. When darkness settled, Ethan returned to the small quarters assigned to him and Rex. The dog curled at the foot of the cot, but didn't sleep. Neither did Ethan. Outside, a coyote called from the hills, a long, lonely note that faded into silence. He reached for his field journal again and wrote beneath the first line, "Arrogance is a louder enemy than fear." He closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay still. Tomorrow he would meet the cadets. Young, proud, untested, they'd look at him and see another officer, another outsider. They wouldn't see the man who once dragged his team through hell because he refused to leave them behind. But that was fine. Ethan Walker had learned long ago that respect wasn't given. It was earned in the quiet moments when no one was watching. As the clock ticked toward midnight, he reached down, feeling Rex's heartbeat under his palm, steady, faithful, alive. "We start over tomorrow," he murmured. "Different place, same war." The dog shifted closer, exhaling softly, and the room fell still again, filled with the weight of unspoken memories and the thin, cold air of the Colorado night. Morning light bled through the mist over Fort Ridge, catching the glint of metal helmets as cadets formed ranks across the field. Ethan Walker stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching their movements like a man reading a familiar language written by someone who had forgotten half the words. His task today was simple: observe, document, and quietly test the structure of the Ranger training system. But beneath the surface, tension was already taking root. Captain Marcus Hale made his presence known the moment he stepped onto the field. His voice, sharp and commanding, sliced through the cold air as he barked orders at his cadets. To them, he was both mentor and executioner, demanding respect through fear, not faith. Ethan had seen that kind of leadership before in the deserts of Kandahar, where arrogance had cost good men their lives. He kept his expression neutral as Hale approached him between drills. "You're free to watch, Navy, but don't interfere," Hale said, his tone half warning, half taunt. Ethan nodded once. "Just observing." He let the words hang there, calm but heavy enough to show that he'd learned to measure power in silence, not volume. The cadets pushed through the obstacle course, mud flying, boots slipping, lungs burning. Among them, one figure caught Ethan's attention. A young man lagging behind, yet refusing to quit. His name tag read Ryan Blake. There was something raw in the way Blake moved, uncoordinated but determined. Later, during the cool-down, Ethan saw Hale berate him harshly for missing a mark by seconds. The tirade lasted longer than necessary. Blake didn't argue, just clenched his fists and stood still. Ethan recognized the look. It was the same quiet endurance of soldiers who had learned that fighting back wasn't always strength. It was sometimes survival. Later that day, in the mess hall, Ethan sat at an isolated table with Rex lying quietly at his feet. The low hum of conversation faded as he entered, replaced by curious stares. Military culture was tribal. Outsiders weren't welcomed easily. A few cadets whispered about the SEAL who'd been sent to spy. Ethan ignored them. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching, but didn't move. That discipline wasn't trained. It was earned through loss and loyalty. Once in Afghanistan, Rex had stayed perfectly still for 2 hours beside a wounded Marine while mortar fire rained around them. Since then, the dog seemed to understand patience better than most men. Halfway through the meal, Ryan Blake approached with hesitant respect. "Sir," he said quietly, "Captain Hale told us you served in Helmand." Ethan looked up. "A long time ago." Blake hesitated. "My brother didn't come back from there." There was no need for more words. Ethan saw the reason behind the young man's grit, the silent vow that every survivor carried. He gave a single nod. "Then you already know why training matters." Blake nodded back, expression tight. "Sir, permission to ask, what's it like when everything falls apart?" Ethan paused, his spoon still mid-air. "You find out who you really are," he said finally, "and sometimes that's the hardest part." By afternoon, rumors had started to swirl. Hale had made subtle remarks in front of the troops about pampered Navy men and desk soldiers sent by Washington. The mockery spread like wildfire. Ethan didn't respond. He'd long since learned that time revealed character better than confrontation. Yet something about Hale's need to provoke him spoke of deeper insecurity. He suspected that his arrival had unsettled the man's authority, and that meant trouble. Colonel Sarah Donovan called Ethan to her office near dusk. The light was soft, filtered through blinds, cutting thin shadows across her desk. "I've been hearing things," she said, leaning forward. "You're not exactly making friends." Ethan almost smiled. "Didn't come here for that." Donovan studied him, eyes sharp, but not unkind. "Captain Hale's methods work, but they're outdated. I need your evaluation to be fair, not emotional. Can I count on that?" Ethan met her gaze steadily. "I don't do emotional reports, ma'am. I write what I see." She seemed to weigh that response, then nodded. "Good. Just be careful. This place has its own politics." As he left her office, the sky had turned a deep violet. The wind coming off the mountains carried the smell of pine and cold earth. Rex walked beside him, alert but calm. Ethan's thoughts drifted, not to the politics of the base, but to a boy named Roberts, whose last words in Helmand had been, "Don't let them turn us into numbers." He'd written those words in a letter to command once, right before the blast that ended his career and nearly Rex's life. Maybe that was why the assignment to Fort Ridge felt personal. He'd seen systems fail before, and he wasn't about to watch it happen again. That night, while reviewing footage from the day's drills, Ethan heard faint voices through the barracks window. Hale's tone was unmistakable. "He's here to undermine us," he was saying to a group of senior cadets. "The Navy wants to humiliate this unit. I won't let that happen." Another voice, eager and young, replied, "What do you want us to do, sir?" Hale's answer was low, deliberate. "Remind him this is our ground. Make him want to leave." Ethan sat still, letting the words settle. It wasn't fear he felt or anger. It was calculation. Every move Hale made revealed another weakness. Rex stirred, sensing his unease. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's head. "Not yet," he whispered. "We wait." The strategy was simple. Let them expose themselves. He'd learned in combat that rushing toward a fight often played right into the enemy's plan. Patience was his weapon now. Near midnight, the power flickered. Outside, a figure moved across the parade ground, quick and quiet, heading toward the storage shed near the training field. Ethan stood by the window, eyes narrowing. Rex growled softly, a low rumble in the dark. Ethan didn't move yet, just watched as the figure disappeared into the fog. He knew instinct when it spoke, the feeling that something larger was beginning to unfold. He checked his watch. 0.03 hours. Tomorrow's schedule listed hand-to-hand demonstration under Captain Hale's direction. The timing wasn't coincidence. Ethan closed the curtain, his jaw tightening. "They'll test us tomorrow," he said under his breath. Rex tilted his head, alert, waiting for command. "And we'll let them," Ethan added quietly, "but only once." Outside, the wind swept across the empty field, carrying the faint clang of a distant flagpole against its chain. Somewhere beyond the mist, unseen eyes were already watching. Ethan knew that whatever happened next would not be about training anymore. It would be a lesson in control, one Hale would regret teaching. The next morning, the air above Fort Ridge was sharp with frost, and the mountains seemed closer, pressing down on the base as if waiting for something to happen. The field was already crowded with cadets forming tight lines, their breath hanging in the cold air. Ethan Walker stood beside Rex near the training ring, expression unreadable. He had slept little, though his mind was clear. The night's overheard conversation still echoed in his thoughts. Captain Hale's plan to humiliate him publicly during the hand-to-hand demonstration. It wasn't fear that kept him awake, but anticipation. In his experience, the most dangerous men weren't those who shouted threats, but those who smiled before they struck. Hale was one of them. Colonel Sarah Donovan arrived early, standing at the edge of the field with her hands clasped behind her back, an observer rather than participant. She'd approved Hale's demonstration as part of a morale exercise, but even she sensed the tension thickening the air. The cadets were restless, whispering between ranks. Some wanted to see the SEAL fail, others wanted to see him fight. Either way, no one expected neutrality today. Captain Hale stepped forward, his voice booming across the field. "Today, we're going to test combat readiness, real aggression, real stakes." He scanned the group, eyes settling on Ethan. "Since we have a guest from the Navy, I think it's only fair he shows us how the SEALs do it." The crowd stirred, laughter, a few taunts. Ethan didn't react. He handed his gloves to a nearby cadet and walked toward the ring, movements deliberate and calm. Rex stayed seated at the edge, eyes locked on his handler, body tense but obedient. The man chosen to face him was Staff Sergeant Lewis Garner, Hale's most trusted instructor. Garner was broad-shouldered and silent, known for his merciless sparring sessions that left cadets bruised for days. Ethan had met men like him in every theater of war. Good soldiers who'd learned the wrong kind of loyalty. Hale clapped Garner on the shoulder. "Show him how we build Rangers." Garner just nodded. As they squared off, Ethan saw the faint smirk on Hale's face and understood the setup. Garner wasn't just demonstrating technique. He was under orders to break him. But Ethan had endured worse than a staged humiliation. The whistle blew. Garner lunged first, fast, heavy, all muscle. Ethan deflected the hit, moving light, economical. The cadets shouted, egging them on. Hale barked commentary meant to humiliate. "Come on, Navy! Is that how you fight in the water?" Ethan ignored the noise. The second attack came harder, a sweep, meant to knock him off balance. He let it land partially, rolling with the motion instead of resisting. Garner pressed forward, overcommitted. In that instant, Ethan pivoted, dropped low, and swept Garner's leg out from under him, catching him mid-fall to prevent injury, a reflex born from thousands of hours of combat drills. The field went silent. Garner hit the ground hard, gasping, but Ethan had already stepped back, hands raised, eyes calm. "Again," Hale ordered, voice tight. Garner rose, face red, and rushed him. This time, Ethan didn't soften the impact. He sidestepped, caught Garner's wrist, and brought him down in a controlled hold, pressure just shy of pain. 2 seconds of silence stretched across the field before he released and stepped back again. Hale's expression darkened. What was meant to humiliate the SEAL had backfired. "Enough," Colonel Donovan said sharply, cutting through the tension. Her tone left no room for debate. But Hale wasn't finished. He turned to the cadets. "Did everyone see how polite the Navy fights? Out there, that hesitation gets people killed." He looked at Ethan. "Maybe that's why your unit took such heavy losses." The words hit like shrapnel, not because they were true, but because they weren't. Ethan's jaw tightened, his composure fracturing for the first time. Around him, the cadets fell silent. Even Hale seemed to realize he'd gone too far, but the damage was done. Ethan stepped closer, voice low but steady. "You talk about loss like it's theory. I've carried it." The air thickened. He turned to the cadets. "You want to know what combat really teaches? It's not strength. It's control. The man who survives isn't the one who hits hardest. It's the one who doesn't lose himself doing it." Rex growled softly behind him, as if sensing the shift. The moment passed, and Ethan walked off the field without another word. Donovan followed him with her eyes, but didn't intervene. Some lessons, she knew, couldn't be stopped once they started. That afternoon, whispers rippled through the base. Some cadets spoke with newfound respect. Others mocked him behind closed doors. Hale retreated to his office, anger simmering beneath a thin veneer of authority. The incident had embarrassed him in front of everyone, and men like Hale didn't forgive humiliation. They retaliated. In the quiet of his quarters, Ethan sat beside Rex, the dog's head resting against his knee. He ran his hand along the animal's neck absently, thoughts as heavy. "They'll come again," he murmured. Rex's tail twitched once, a silent agreement. Ethan thought of Helmand, the night he'd carried a wounded Marine through mortar fire while Rex barked to draw enemy attention. That same loyalty now anchored him in this new war, the kind fought with pride and prejudice instead of bullets. A knock sounded at the door. It was Ryan Blake, hesitating before entering. "Sir," he said softly, "Captain Hale's furious. He's saying you undermined command." Ethan didn't look up. "Did I?" "No, sir," Blake said quickly. "You showed control. Everyone saw it." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then that's enough." Blake lingered, unsure whether to say more. "Sir, there's something else. Some of the guys, they're saying Tomorrow's night navigation exercise isn't what it looks like. They're planning something." Ethan looked up then, meeting Blake's eyes. "Who told you?" Blake hesitated. "I heard them near the equipment shed. They said you won't make it through the course." The room went silent except for Rex's low growl. Ethan stood, every muscle calm but coiled. "Thank you, Ryan. That's all you need to do. Stay out of it." Blake started to protest, but Ethan's tone made it final. When the door closed, Ethan turned back to Rex. "So it's tonight," he said quietly. The dog lifted his head, eyes alert. Ethan strapped on his watch, checked his gear, and took one last look at the fading light outside. The mountains were swallowing the sun, and shadows stretched long across the training grounds. Somewhere out there, Hale and his loyal few were waiting. Ethan felt the familiar stillness settle inside him, the same calm that came right before contact. "Different field," he whispered to Rex. "Same war." The first stars appeared above the Rockies, and the base siren sounded faintly in the distance. Night drills were beginning. Rex stood, silent beside him. Ethan opened the door and stepped into the cold, the sound of boots on gravel marking the start of what would no longer be a test. The fog rolled down from the Colorado mountains like a living thing, coiling around the barracks and smothering the faint light of Fort Ridge. It was 2300 hours when Ethan Walker stepped out into the open, the base almost silent, except for the distant clank of a flagpole against its chain. Rex moved beside him, his steps noiseless, his breath quick in the cold. Somewhere across the field, the night navigation exercise had already begun. At least, that was the official story. Ethan knew better. This wasn't a drill. It was a setup. Earlier that day, Captain Marcus Hale had signed off the exercise with unusual enthusiasm, assigning routes that crossed through the outer perimeter, a stretch of broken ground and unfinished structures where no surveillance cameras reached. On paper, it was routine. In reality, it was isolation, the perfect place to make someone disappear without witnesses. Ethan had seen this pattern before, in combat zones and in systems corrupted by pride. "You can hide your intentions," he whispered to himself, "but you can't hide your fear." Rex's low growl drew his attention. The dog had stopped near the edge of the training compound, nose lifted, eyes fixed on the tree line. Ethan crouched, scanning the darkness. No movement, but instinct told him the same thing the dog already knew. They weren't alone. He gave a quiet hand signal. Rex fell silent, slipping into the fog like a shadow. Ethan followed the path outlined in his map, boots crunching over damp gravel, until the noise of the base faded behind him. Up ahead, the silhouette of Staff Sergeant Garner appeared near a storage structure, flashlight cutting brief arcs through the mist. Ethan slowed, keeping distance. Garner's voice was low, talking to someone just out of sight. "He'll be here any minute. When he passes the tower, we cut him off." Ethan's stomach tightened. So it was true. Hale wasn't content with embarrassment. He wanted damage. The question was, how far would he go? Rex reappeared at Ethan's side, head low, tail rigid. They moved closer, unseen through the fog. When Ethan reached the tower, he could hear muffled steps circling behind him. He stopped deliberately, giving them the illusion of surprise. "Evening, gentlemen," he said evenly. "Didn't think the training course included ambush drills." A pause. Then Hale's voice came out of the dark, measured and calm, but laced with venom. "Some lessons have to be earned, Navy." Figures emerged, Hale, Garner, and two cadets, faces hidden behind balaclavas, though Ethan could recognize their posture, the same arrogance, the same certainty of numbers, 4 against 1. The math was bad for them. "You could have just asked for a rematch," Ethan said, voice quiet but cutting. Hale stepped closer. "You think you can walk into my base and humiliate me? You don't belong here. You never did." Ethan didn't move. "Then why does it feel like you're afraid?" Hale's expression flickered. "Afraid? Of what?" "Of the truth," Ethan said. "That everything you built here, every rule, every speech is held together by fear. And fear doesn't make leaders, it makes cowards." Hale lunged. The world narrowed to motion, sound, and instinct. Ethan sidestepped, grabbed Hale's arm, and twisted. The movement was controlled but powerful, enough to take him down without lasting harm. Garner rushed forward next, a blur in the fog. Rex intercepted, knocking him sideways, teeth bared but controlled, his growl vibrating low through the ground. The two cadets hesitated, unsure. "You want to finish what he started?" Ethan asked. Neither moved. The fight ended faster than it began. Hale, gasping, tried to rise, but Ethan pinned him with his knee, not in anger, but in quiet authority. "You don't lead by force," Ethan said, breath steady. "You lead by example. You've forgotten that." Hale spat out dirt, trembling between rage and humiliation. "You think you're teaching me something?" "No," Ethan said, standing. "I'm teaching them." At that moment, flashlights cut through the fog from the west. Colonel Donovan's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Captain Hale, stand down!" Military police moved in, their boots pounding the frozen ground. She'd been watching the operation unfold remotely, alerted by a silent GPS ping Ethan had activated before leaving his quarters. Donovan's expression was controlled, but her disappointment was visible. "You've disgraced your command," she said flatly. Hale tried to speak, but she cut him off. "Not another word." She turned to Ethan. "You knew this was going to happen." "I had a feeling," Ethan replied. "Men like him never stop until someone makes them." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You've made your point, Lieutenant Walker. Go get checked by medical. I'll handle the rest." But the night wasn't over. As Hale was escorted away, Ethan knelt beside Rex, checking for injury. The dog was fine, heart pounding, eyes bright, as if he too understood the strange morality of what had just happened. For Rex, loyalty was instinct. For Ethan, it was choice. "Good work," he said softly. Rex licked his hand once, a wordless answer. Later, back in his quarters, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, watching frost form on the window pane. The fog outside glowed faintly under the perimeter lights. He thought of Ryan Blake, how the boy had warned him, risking his standing among peers. He thought of Hale, broken not by strength, but by truth. And he thought of his own past, men who had gone too far in the name of discipline, until someone finally said enough. There was a quiet knock on the door. It was Blake, face pale, voice uncertain. "Sir, is it true? They arrested Captain Hale?" Ethan nodded. "He'll answer for it." Blake hesitated. "Does it ever stop, sir? Men like him?" Ethan looked at him for a long time before answering. "No," he said quietly, "it doesn't stop. But every time you stand your ground, it gets harder for them to win." The cadet nodded slowly, absorbing the words, then left. Ethan sat in silence, listening to the hum of the base generator and the faint breathing of Rex asleep by the door. Somewhere out there, the first report was already being written, And tomorrow, Fort Ridge would wake to a different kind of morning. But as he reached to turn off the lamp, his phone buzzed once on the table. A message, unknown number, 2 words. Not over. Ethan stared at the screen, jaw tightening. He didn't recognize the number, but he knew the tone. There were always more layers beneath the surface, more men like Hale waiting for their turn. He looked down at Rex, now awake and alert again, sensing the change in his handler's breathing. "Seems we're not done yet," Ethan murmured. The dog stood, silent, ready. Outside, the fog thickened once more, swallowing the lights of the base as if erasing the line between what was over and what was only beginning. By dawn, Fort Ridge no longer felt like the same base. The fog had lifted, but a heavier kind of haze lingered, the kind made from silence and half-truths. Captain Hale's arrest the night before had sent ripples through every corridor. Cadets whispered in small clusters, instructors spoke in clipped tones, and everyone avoided the East Training Range, where the confrontation had taken place. Ethan Walker knew the military well enough to recognize the pattern. When the system was threatened, it didn't crumble. It closed ranks. He stood outside the headquarters building, coffee cooling in his hand, Rex sitting beside him, watching the movements around the parade ground. The dog was calm, though his eyes followed every soldier who passed. Ethan had seen that look before. It wasn't curiosity, it was vigilance. Both of them had learned the hard way that danger didn't always wear a uniform. Colonel Sarah Donovan called him in at 800 hours. Her office was unusually neat today, as though control over her desk could compensate for the disorder spreading through the command structure. She didn't waste words. "Hale's in custody, but the situation isn't clean," she said. "His arrest triggered an internal inquiry, Lahore, and some of his allies are already moving to protect him." She slid a folder across the table. "These are communications logs from the base network. Look at the last 48 hours. Ethan opened the file. The timestamps told a story of their own. Encrypted messages sent from Hale's terminal, even after he was detained, routed through an off-grid device near the motor pool. "Someone's helping him," Ethan said quietly. Donovan nodded. "We're calling it an internal breach until proven otherwise. I need to know if this goes beyond Fort Ridge. Command wants your assessment. Unofficially." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And officially?" "Officially," Donovan said, "this conversation never happened." He studied her face for a moment. She wasn't just covering her command. She was afraid. Not of Hale, but of what his downfall might expose. "I'll look into it," he said. Donovan leaned back, exhaling. "Keep it quiet. If someone's cleaning his tracks, I want them unaware you're looking." Ethan left the office and found Ryan Blake waiting outside, shifting uncomfortably. "Sir," the cadet said, "they're saying some of Hale's men are being questioned, but 2 of them didn't report this morning." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "Garner, sir, and Cadet Hull." Garner, the same instructor who'd tried to break him during the demonstration. Hull, one of the masked cadets from the ambush. Missing. Ethan felt the pieces begin to connect. He and Rex crossed to the motor pool, where the smell of fuel and cold metal hung thick in the air. The garage bay was half open, mechanics moving in slow rhythm as if the entire place was pretending nothing had changed. A sergeant at the gate stopped him, recognizing the face, if not the authority. "Can I help you, sir?" Ethan held up the folder. "Base inquiry. I need access to the surveillance archive." The man hesitated, but stepped aside. "You'll want Bay 3, he said. Inside, the hum of generators filled the silence. Ethan crouched beside the console, loading the logs. Rex stood guard by the door, eyes fixed on the movement outside. The first few minutes of footage showed nothing unusual, until 0200 hours, when two silhouettes entered the bay, moving with the confidence of people who belonged there. Garner and Hull. They loaded crates into the back of a Humvee, then one of them looked straight at the camera. Ethan froze the frame. Hale. The footage was time-stamped 4 hours after his arrest. He felt a cold clarity settle in. Hale wasn't just being protected, he was being moved. "They staged it," Ethan muttered. Rex whined softly, sensing his tension. He copied the file, tucked the drive into his pocket, and turned to leave. As he stepped into the daylight, the sound of an engine roared across the yard. A Humvee burst from behind the motor pool fence, heading toward the forest perimeter. Without hesitation, Ethan ran. "Rex, go!" The dog bolted ahead, closing distance fast. The Humvee swerved through the gate, tires kicking gravel. Ethan jumped into a parked Jeep, the ignition still hot, and tore after it. The chase cut through the open field, then into the tree line. The forest swallowed the sound, leaving only the crunch of tires and the low snarl of pursuit. Branches whipped past as Ethan pushed the vehicle harder. Up ahead, the Humvee hit a ridge and skidded sideways, smoke rising from its rear axle. Hale climbed out first, limping but defiant, shouting orders to Garner, "Get the drive, now!" Ethan stepped out slowly, sidearm raised, Rex emerging beside him like a shadow. "It's over, Hale," Ethan called out. "You're not going anywhere." Hale's laugh echoed off the trees, bitter and thin. "You don't even know who you're working for, do you, Walker? You think this ends with me?" He gestured toward the Humvee. "That data in there, it's not mine, it's theirs. You shut this down, and you'll make enemies you can't even see." Ethan didn't answer. He moved forward, deliberate and steady. Hale reached for his weapon. Too slow. Rex lunged, knocking it from his hand. Garner raised his rifle, but Ethan fired once, clean through the shoulder, dropping him without hesitation. Within minutes, military police arrived, guided by the GPS beacon Ethan had triggered during the pursuit. Hale was restrained, bleeding pride more than pain. Donovan arrived soon after, her expression carved from stone. "You went rogue," she said quietly. Ethan shrugged. "You told me to keep it quiet." She looked at him, then at Hale, who smirked through his bruised face. "This isn't over," he said again. As they loaded him into custody, Ethan caught sight of the crate inside the Humvee. The markings weren't military. Civilian tech labels, wiped serial numbers, and one stenciled word barely visible under dust. Redcrest. He'd heard it once before, whispered during an operation that never made official records, tied to a private contractor specializing in data warfare. He stared at it for a long moment before turning to Donovan. "Whatever this is," he said, "it's bigger than your base." That night, back in his quarters, Ethan sat at the desk, the flash drive from the motor pool resting beside his coffee. Rex lay nearby, finally asleep, chest rising and falling steadily. He plugged in the drive and watched as lines of encrypted code filled the screen. Data transfers, payments, untraceable orders. Every line pointed to one thing. Hale wasn't acting alone. Someone higher had been using Fort Ridge as a test site, and Hale's downfall had just exposed the edges of something far wider. Outside, the wind swept against the windows, rattling the glass. Ethan leaned back, rubbing the scar along his forearm, the one that always burned when he was too close to the truth. "So that's it," he said under his breath. "A ghost in the system." He looked toward the sleeping dog. "Guess we got one more hunt." In the distance, thunder rolled over the Rockies. The storm that had been building for days was finally breaking, and somewhere deep inside Fort Ridge's network, a new transmission blinked to life, encrypted, untraceable, and marked only with 3 words: "Find Walker." Delete. Night descended over Fort Ridge like a shroud of iron and static. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke, rain hammering the tin roofs in relentless rhythm. Ethan Walker sat alone in the operations room, the low blue glow of the monitor illuminating his face. On screen, lines of encrypted code flickered across the data drive he had retrieved from Hale's Humvee. Every attempt to access it triggered more security layers. Whoever had built this encryption wasn't protecting secrets from soldiers, they were protecting them from governments. Rex lay at his feet, eyes half closed but alert, ears twitching with every sound of thunder outside. The dog hadn't slept properly since the chase. He sensed it too, that this was no longer about personal rivalry or discipline. This was about exposure. And in the military, exposure could kill more effectively than bullets. Colonel Sarah Donovan entered quietly, shutting the door behind her. Her uniform was wet from the storm, but her voice was steady. "Command sent an inquiry team from Washington," she said. "They'll arrive by morning. I need to know what's on that drive before they do." Ethan turned the screen toward her. "The encryption uses a military private hybrid cipher. Someone blended defense protocols with civilian tech, likely outsourced. But I found this buried signature." He magnified a small line of metadata, RC Node 47. Donovan frowned. "Redcrest?" Ethan nodded. "The same name painted on Hale's crate." He explained what he'd discovered: hidden transactions, encrypted communications, and a list of project tags cross-linked with Fort Ridge's training data. "They weren't just stealing intel," he said quietly. "They were testing psychological conditioning methods on cadets, running behavioral response algorithms during training. Hale's program was never about discipline. It was data mining human resilience." Donovan's eyes darkened. "That's not possible. No one would authorize that kind of research on soldiers." Ethan's tone didn't change. "Someone did." Lightning cracked outside, throwing their reflections across the window. Donovan paced, processing the implications. "If this leaks," she said, "Fort Ridge becomes a scandal that reaches the Pentagon." Ethan leaned back. "If it doesn't, Redcrest keeps operating. Under new names, new contracts." She stopped pacing. "What do you suggest?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he inserted a secondary drive into the port. "There's a trace protocol embedded in this data. If I run it, I can locate the off-site server Redcrest is using, but once I do, they'll know." Donovan exhaled slowly. "Meaning they'll come for you?" "They already are," Ethan said, glancing at Rex, who had lifted his head again. The monitor pinged. "Connection detected. Coordinates: Denver outskirts, industrial zone, no official registry." Donovan stared at the screen, then at him. "You're not seriously going after them?" Ethan shut the laptop and stood. "You asked for my assessment, Colonel. This is it. If Redcrest stays buried, men like Hale are just the surface. I can end it where it starts." She didn't try to stop him. "Walker," she said as he turned to leave, "if this goes wrong, command won't back you?" He gave a faint smile. Wouldn't be the first time. By 0200 hours, Ethan and Rex were on the road, the Jeep slicing through sheets of rain toward Denver. The coordinates led to an abandoned freight complex at the edge of an industrial park. Empty loading docks, flickering lights, and the low hum of hidden power. Ethan parked a block away, killed the engine, and sat for a moment, listening to the storm. The wind howled against the windshield. Rex gave a short, low growl. "Yeah," Ethan murmured. "I feel it too." He moved in low, slipping through the gate, rain soaking through his jacket. The warehouse ahead glowed faintly with generator light. Through a cracked window, he saw movement. 2 figures near computer terminals, armed, scanning documents. Contractors, not soldiers. Their movements were too casual for military precision. Ethan counted 3 more near the far exit. 5 in total. "Security detail," he whispered, "not expecting visitors." Rex waited for the signal, a soft tap on the knee. Then he disappeared into the dark, circling wide. Ethan entered through a side door, silent as breath, his weapon drawn but low. The first man barely had time to turn before Ethan's arm locked around his throat, lowering him to the ground without a sound. Another guard approached the noise, flashlight cutting through the rain dripping from the ceiling. Rex hit him from the side, one quick motion, not an attack of fury but precision. Within moments, 2 guards were unconscious. Ethan moved to the central console. The monitors displayed live data, experimental schedules, stress response metrics, combat footage tagged with numeric identifiers. Every file was labeled under one directive: Project Redcrest, Human Optimization Unit. At the bottom of the feed, a live connection blinked open. A voice transmission. "Fort Ridge node compromised. Delete all field data. Eliminate asset walker." Ethan's jaw tightened. He started the upload trace, rerouting the server's feed to a secure Navy archive. Progress bar, 28%. He could hear footsteps behind him, reinforcements. A gunshot cracked, shattering glass above his head. He rolled to cover, firing back once. Rex barked sharply from the shadows, drawing fire away. "Keep moving," Ethan called, hitting the final sequence on the keyboard. Upload 76%. The exchange of gunfire echoed through the warehouse. Sparks leapt from machinery as bullets struck metal. Ethan hit one target cleanly, another went down with a shout. 93%. One of the terminals sparked violently. Too late to stop the transfer. 100%. A message flashed. Data secured. Transmission complete. He grabbed the drive, whistled for Rex, and headed for the exit as the generator exploded behind them. Flames licked the walls, smoke filling the air. They reached the Jeep just as the building went up, fire lighting the rain-soaked sky. Ethan drove fast, watching the inferno fade in the rearview mirror. He didn't speak until they were miles away. "It's over," he said softly, though he didn't believe it. Back at Fort Ridge, the dawn broke gray and thin. Colonel Donovan stood waiting at the gate, her expression unreadable. Ethan handed her the drive. "It's done, but they'll erase everything from their side." Donovan nodded slowly. "What did you find?" "Proof," he said. "Enough to bury them, if anyone's brave enough to read it." She took the drive, her voice low. "You should disappear for a while. Redcrest won't stop. You just made them desperate." Ethan gave a faint, tired smile. "I'll take my chances." He looked down at Rex, who leaned quietly against his leg. Rain still dripping from his fur. "We always do." As Ethan walked away toward the open road, The morning sun struggled to break through the clouds. Behind him, Fort Ridge was already returning to its routines, drills, commands, the illusion of order. In his pocket, his phone buzzed once more. A single message appeared on the encrypted channel. Redcrest node offline. Next phase pending. He looked at it for a long moment before sliding the phone away. "So it begins again," he murmured. Then, with Rex at his side, he stepped off the base and into the gray horizon, the storm clearing but the war far from over. In the end, Ethan Walker learned that the greatest battles are not fought on distant battlefields, but inside the walls we trust the most. And sometimes the enemy isn't a man with a weapon. It's the silence we allow, the injustice we ignore, and the darkness we pretend not to see. Yet even in that darkness, God leaves small miracles for those who refuse to give up. A warning at the right moment, a loyal companion by your side, the strength to stand firm when the world pushes back. If Ethan's journey teaches us anything, it's this: courage grows where faith lives, and no matter how broken a system becomes, God always plants one righteous person to expose the truth. Before you go, reflect on your own life. Where have you seen God place a small miracle in your path? Where did He give you strength when you had none? Share your story in the comments so others can find hope. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and God's hidden mercy. And may God bless you, protect your home, and walk beside you through every unseen battle.